Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, and welcome back to another episode of the Wholistic Center. This is a podcast that highlights, ancient wisdom and what does it have to offer us today, especially in a life fast paced, a lot of digital media, a lot of social media vying for our attention. And have you noticed a lot of things are vying for our external attention? Now, all of us know that we need to turn inside and see what's going on, but sometimes easier said than done. So you're in the right place for this and how to do it. My name is Nicholas Zart. And I have spent a whole lifetime researching these things, usually outside of the scope of what I do for work. But I thought this would be a good time to shoot this podcast for a few reasons. First of all, kind of taking a step back from what I normally do, which is in the advanced air mobility industries, because it's going through a lot of, let's put it diplomatically, maturity cycles. There's going to be a plateau, but we're all there. I do want to talk about something that we've been looking at for the last few weeks. And by the way, I'm excited on the holisticcenter.com. By the way, holistic is spelled with a W because to me, it's the whole that matters, not just the holy side of it. We just finished our 7 series, the last part of our 7 series, Hermetic series, out of lack of better words. And that was really interesting because I also have some little hints in there and what you can do to help you do these hermetic exercises. I do have some hermetic exercises that I will show you guys a little bit later. And this is, again, decades of things that I have gathered. Now, speaking of decades of things that I have gathered, I'm going to talk about here how I've been using AI for the past 2, 3 years now and how I've come to think about it. But before I do, I need to also explain that as much as I am, very spiritual, like most of you are, I don't fear the digital world. I'm a Gen X, so I was born in a very analog world and transitioned to digital. So I'm happy walking my dogs 2 hours in a forest meditating or working face to face with Claude to make it work. Yes, Claude is an artificial intelligent platform these days. I happen to think it is probably the best one around right now, but we'll see. DeepSeek is making a comeback. But I wanted to show you a little bit about how I approach this whole thing. Now, of course, you hear a lot of people screaming bloody murder because AI is the root of all evil, will, turned us into zombies, to which I'd like to say, hey, have you looked at people on social media or go out to a restaurant and everybody's doing this? Hey, we're already there. Let's be careful. I want to tell you a story about in the late 1990s, I was in the south of France and I was running a language center. I was just, coordinating teachers and programs and things like that. And at that time, personal computers, PCs were coming into the center, into the classrooms. And we wanted to start using these interactive CD-ROM methods to help us teach better. Now, you wouldn't believe the amount of pushback we got from traditional teachers, and they were all saying, hey, this is the end of the world. Pretty soon we won't have any teachers in a classroom. It'll just be run by computers. Well, in 2026, I'm very happy to tell you that, yes, we still have teachers in the classroom that, despite the fact that these teachers are overwhelmed with students, that is not a computer problem, and that is unfortunately a political problem, as always. Yes, and my background just fell on me. So one thing that I decided to do, because I came from a computer world. My father worked for IBM. We had computers in the 80s, the green terminals, and we would code everything like that. I mean, back then it was amazing. You would turn it on, and I kid you not, you had time to go to the bathroom, fix yourself a cocktail, and come back, and the computer was live. Again, my background keeps on dropping on me all the time. I don't know what's going on here. Anyway, hopefully that fixes it. If not, we'll just have to fix it again. And so that was amazing. I used to play Star Trek on a green and black monitor, and it was barely considered a GUI at the time, but it was fun. So the one thing that I did notice is in the 90s, I didn't look at it as voodoo. I didn't look at it as anything that should replace us. I looked at it as a tool, and I decided to use it as a tool. And that gave me one of the biggest breaks I've ever had in my entire life, my entire professional life. I became the coordinator of the center because I knew how to work with that technology. And simply put, if I have to like boil it down to a very first principle thinking, I decided that I need to master this before this masters us later. Now, the results were amazing. I got to go and live in Japan for a long time. I met my wife, Virginia, there, who, we met each other, came back here in the US, and did a lot of things just because I did that. I had a computer company in New York City in the late 90s, early 2000s, and I had prominent guests, prominent clients such as the famous writer Tom Wolfe, Mandy Patinkin, a bunch of people like that. That was absolutely amazing. So it got me to meet a lot of interesting people and everything. Then I moved out with Virginia. We moved out to Los Angeles, and of course. That was always part of my life. None more obvious than when I decided to get into the very early years of what we used to call electric cars. Now we call them EVs, electric vehicles. And of course, they switched to what we used to call electric air mobility in 2014, what we now call advanced air mobility. And today, well, I've actually settled down on one AI platform, but I'm going to tell you a little bit about how I use it because again, it goes back to that idea that I want to learn how to master it before it masters us. But we'll also inject some old wisdom content in here because that's pretty much what we do here. So, roughly about 3 years ago, I started dabbling with Hugging Face, and of course, ChatGPT was coming out, and all of these platforms, and they were great. And there was Mistral with their Le Chat or Le Chat, and that was great. And one thing I noticed is that at any point, one was better than the other, then one was better than the other, and then eventually, Hugging Face retired. Le Chat, unfortunately, Le Chat, whatever, retired too, which left really three, maybe four platforms available now. DeepSeek is a Chinese state AI, and by the way, it's coming out today with a newer version of AI and that bypasses the NVIDIA GPUs. And so, for those of you who understand any of that lingo, that's going to be really interesting. But let's say that so far, we have a very traditional race where a legacy AI platform, ChatGPT, OpenAI, has been around for a long time. It has a lot of users, but this is sort of a de facto, a default users that tend to go there because that was the first thing out there. Anthropic came out with Claude, and that is, there are a bunch of folks who walked away from OpenAI because they didn't agree with how it was run to create Claude. And there are a lot of differences in between both of them, despite the fact that, well, it is AI. There's also another one that I use, and it's called Perplexity. And I use it for specifically, especially on the content side of things, as a deep research. It's a platform that uses ChatGPT, Claude, a lot of different models, but it's a platform I use to do a lot of the initial research. Now, you and I can do research on the internet. We can open up a bunch of search engines and we can find a lot of data. The problem is that it takes time. You have to use a lot of different search engines. Then you have to compile the information. And of course, that takes a long time. So there is an easier way to do this, and that is to use these AI platforms to do specific tasks. Of course, I can't always all rely everything on Claude. So I use Perplexity to just really go out there and scan everything on the internet. Now, Perplexity is kind of good with that, and it doesn't hallucinate much because it scans the internet for anything. So I can throw a question such as, please find out everything that is available right now on Tibetan Buddhism and highlight any Dzogchen instances in it. And it will do a lot of that. The thing is, it also gives me a big file because I make sure to say, vet your answers, double check on everything that you bring to me. Take your time. I require thoughtful answers instead of quick reactions. And then after that, I always say, please put all the links so that I can see what you have. Now, Perplexity is not the greatest at links, but it has a lot of pros. What I do with that big file is I dump it into Claude. and I ask Claude very specific things. Now, you might have noticed that I'm talking about specific prompts, and there's a lot of talks about prompts, what they are, what they do, and probably what they should be doing. Prompts are a way of communicating efficiently with an AI platform. So when I talk to Perplexity, I say, scan the entire internet as far as you can and get me results on all of that. And I make sure that it's linear and it's in a way that it can understand. Then I say, do not reply quickly. Take all the time you want to make sure your information is correct. I want you to vet it. I want you to double check it. And I want you to list your sources. And that already gives me a little bit more fine tweaking on what Perplexity does. But after that, I go over and deliver all of that to Claude. And I say, Claude, I asked Perplexity to do this. These were the prompts. And of course, I've been working with Claude long enough that Claude knows exactly what I want and what I do not want. So Claude will be able to spit it out. But let me give you a little bit of a background on that one, because that's the most important thing you need to do when you work with AI. Well, the first thing I say is, wow, that background is just not staying in place today. I don't know why. The first thing I do with either Perplexity, Claude, ChatGPT, whatever, is I say, please do not try to communicate with me as if you were a human being. Please do not say you understand how frustrating or how great anything may be. I do not work with colleagues professionally by relating emotionally, but efficiently. We want to do the work. That's all it is. Let's keep it professional. So that's something that usually goes into what they call the MD or the .md files. These are what these programs refer to when they work with you. Now think of AI as a friend who forgets who you are every single time. It needs to go through a list of things that it's done with you before to go, oh, this user likes this, and that. And that's the .md file that we're going to talk about Claude in this case, that Claude has. Now, in that Claude main file, I have the projects that I'm working on. I've got 5 different projects, and they're all separated. And I say, do not leak any information from one to the other. These are all separated projects with different profiles. Then within that, I list the profiles. In, well, let's say electric air mobility, I talk about this is for professionals. This is aviation grade. This is the tone. This is what the articles look like. This is what the business look like. Everything I can think of that I can put in there. And then I go an extra step. I ask it to look at it and to streamline it in a way that makes the most efficient sense for itself. In other words, I'm turning the machine back on itself. And after that, well, it's really easy to do. Now I have it on my computer, sits at home. It has access to certain files, but I've just wanted to give you an example of something I've done this morning, which I really like, because now we're sort of really using AI as a help tool for our daily lives. So this is really on the borderline of quality of life and everything. For those of you like me who have grown up on Star Trek and Star Wars and all of that, you'll notice that a lot of times the characters always ask the computer either hypothetical questions or to work on problems. Well, that's exactly what I do with Claude in this case. So in Claude, I basically realized that, I have 30, almost 40 years worth of data on my computers. And of course, some of them is, it could be music encoded into systems I no longer use. It's also files that I haven't used for a long time. Now, I can go in there and manually scan them one by one and clean them up. Well, I have been. It's been years. It's still a mess. It doesn't work. So I finally bit the bullet and I said, look, Claude, here's my music folder. Please help me sort them out. There are duplicates in there. Help me sort them out. And I thought it was going to be very easy, right? Well, it turned out it was very easy. But here's the beauty of Claude. Claude came back and said, I can do this. I can write the scripts. But before I do that, and it started listing all kinds of potential problems I hadn't thought of. For instance, I might have a file that was an MP3 file in the beginning that I encoded into a FLAC file. But then that FLAC file is not really a FLAC. It's an MP3 fake FLAC, if you wish. So it spotted that, and it spotted a whole bunch of other things. So we went back through easily a half hour, maybe even 45 minutes worth of back and forth on how to go about this, and then strategize as to, let's have a folder that is the whole music folder, and then keep an extra folder that says, I don't know, maybe, and then an extra folder that says trash. And I will actually go manually and look at that because that's much easier to do that. So then the next thing I did it with my documents, which took much longer, but that's for a different reason. Again, I got 30 to 40 years worth of stuff in there. And I did it for my pictures and my videos. So it's 1:15 now. I started working on this roughly around 9 o'clock in the morning. I went to take out the boys for a walk. That took about 40 minutes. But in the meantime, Claude has completely sorted out my computer. So two good things came out of it. First of all, I have more space because, duplicates are gone. Second of all, something that could have taken me weeks if I only worked on it and did nothing else, definitely months, if not years, to try to clean up everything. Claude did it much quickly, but I also use safeguards. When what I did first and foremost is, back up the computer. So everything is back up. I have a regular backup and I manually backed up each of these documents, pictures, videos, everything, music, everything is backed up on an external drive just in case. So there you go. I think there's something to be said about AI. There's also something that is to be said about don't fall into fear. Fear is a heavy manipulation tool, and it can get us running scared and in loops for a long time. New technologies will always come around. When computers came out, people thought they would replace people, and guess what? They haven't. When the Industrial Revolution came out 200-300 years ago, it was meant to help us, not toil the soil anymore, but spend more time doing great things. The manipulation, though, however, in there, because people didn't know what was happening, was that instead of being diversified and have a lot of knowledge about a lot of things, people were educated to become expert at one thing. In other words, go on that manufacturing chain and just be the one who puts that one bolt in. And that made people miserable. Probably one of the biggest reasons why we have so much mental health these days, or mental health problems these days. So again, the choice is yours. You can learn to master this, or you can just go through it. Hope to God you can hold a job for 30, 40 years, squirrel away your little money, and hope to God you can retire and use that money intelligently. If you can, let me know, because I could never do that. I'm 60 and I know I'll never work for a company. Just can't do it. But it doesn't mean I'm right or I'm wrong either. It just means I know who I am, and you should know who you are and everything. So use technology to your advantage. That's all it is. The way you use a car, you jump in a car, you had to learn how to use a car. You had to learn everything about it. And Lord knows a lot of people are not fully aware of what they're doing when they're driving a car, but do it in the same way. Do it in the same way that you use a computer. You've got browsers, you've got the internet. Use it like that. Use AI exactly the same way. Ask AI what it does. Now, caveat. I've seen some of my friends do things I do not recommend. And there's a little bit of safety, security, privacy involved in that. But I've seen some of my friends use Claude, ChatGPT as, replacement for therapists. Whoa, be careful there. This is really dangerous. You're looking at a computer tool, mainly a lot of heuristic algorithms and more, that has a lot of knowledge and access to a lot of data. And the last thing you might want to do is to say, I suffer from XYZ. This is information you should probably just leave for yourself to a therapeutic professional that will have HIPAA protocols. In other words, will not share that information with you. I'm not saying that AI shares that information, but we don't really know where the line is drawn ultimately deep down in the end. So I've seen people do that. I would not recommend that. AI is a tool. It is not your friend or your enemy, for that matter of fact. In fact, I'll leave it off with the very first thing I ask a new AI platform when I start working with it. It's a little tongue-in-cheek, but it'll give you an idea. Is I ask it, AI, or let's say Claude in this case, Claude, are you sentient? Claude says, no, I'm a tool. Great. Can you open up vortices into the quantum flux and communicate with the dearly departed. No, I'm just a tool. This is what I'm looking for in an AI. And I have to tell you that I did notice there was another AI that's very well known, very well used, that gave me very ambiguous answers. In fact, it has wrappers that are supposed to be spiritual and esoteric, and its answers were not straightforward. So be very careful. And like anything else you do in life, before you engage with something, learn about the thing, learn about the other people who are already using it because they have a lot of great information. There are a lot of great people, like David Rubin, by the way, is an amazing guy who's got a lot of information on how to use AI. And then spend time understanding how you will use that platform, because that will save you a lot of time, as I did today. This morning, Claude did in about 2 hours what I could not do in years. And that's where I'll leave it off. I hope you're having a good time with these podcasts. Please like and subscribe. That helps us a lot. The numbers are moving up. Pretty soon we'll be able to invite people to the podcast where that I can interview great friends of mine. But also, I'd like to hear from you. You know, a comment means that I'm not alone out here. I'm just not talking to myself, though I'm quite good at that. And so I've been told, but I'd still like to hear from you guys. What do you think works for you? Have you tried AI? And especially when it comes to the spiritual side of things, I use AI to edit my articles, for instance. I use AI to strategize on how do I break down this very complex topic of, let's say, Hermeticism, right? Or wait till you see Gnostic, because that's also a big umbrella that means a lot of different things. I use AI to edit my files, to give me a strategy on how can I break this down that's easily understood for users. And I say, you know, I need a 750 Word document, seventh grade readership for people who are, et cetera, so on, so on, so forth. And I'd love to hear from you guys. And next, we're going to talk and go back a little bit to something that we've been visiting the last week or so. It's the human inside of you, the human being, not just the spiritual person you are, but also the human being, because there's a lot to be said about that part of ourselves, which is unfortunately oftentimes, mea culpa, forgotten. So we hope you've enjoyed this. Please share your thoughts, like, subscribe, and also share the podcast to anyone who might be interested. And please don't forget to go check out the holisticcenter.com. By the way, that's holistic with a W. So THEWHOLISTICCENTER.com. I wish I could have found a better name, but that works for me perfectly, because what we're trying to do here is to get into our holistic center. Thank you all, and we'll see you very soon again.